Long gone are the days of waiting to be seen in a doctor's office only to have that awkward conversation with your healthcare provider. Wisp gives you access to sexual and reproductive healthcare from the comfort of your home. Get treatment for BV, yeast infections, UTIs, and much more delivered directly to your home or ready for pickup at your local pharmacy in less than 3 hours. The best part? Wisp is discreet, convenient, and you don't need medical insurance to receive care or prescription medication. Visit us today at hellowisp.com.
Work management platforms. Ugh, endless onboarding, IT bottlenecks, admin requests. But what if things were different?
We found love in an open space.
Monday.com is different. No lengthy onboarding. Beautiful reports in minutes. Custom workflows you can build on your own. Easy to use prompt-free AI. Turns out you can love a work management platform. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
All right, so we're back with My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz, and we have a special guest. We have a special fan who we found out that has been listening to the podcast from day one. So this is 53, episode 53. So you've been listening for us for 53 hours. So we appreciate your loyal listening, and and you're from another country. So Jamie, this is Jamie Green. A fan of ours, a fan of the show. So, Jamie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you interested in the podcast and the subject matter, and what's keeping you listening.
Sure. My name's Jamie. I'm a musician and solo artist from London, UK. And I've been following The Escape and the whole case now since, I think, probably 2017. It goes back that far. I remember watching, much like a lot of people that found their way into this whole crazy, amazing escape, is I watched the Clint Eastwood film, Escape from Alcatraz. I think I was working at a recording studio with some of my best friends at the time, and one night we just decided to put it on. And ever since, really, I was just very, very interested and captivated by the escape. And I just thought, wow, what an epic thing that they did. And that just had me hooked, basically. I just went away, and I remember thinking, they must have made it, surely. And even because of the Clint Eastwood film, they left it obviously very open-ended, and that makes a lot of sense for, I guess, the time in which the film was made. I guess there wasn't so much public information out there as what we have now, and from what I've learned from listening to the podcast with you guys for the past year. But I always thought there's absolutely no way that you can be that creative and that resourceful in a prison only to get to the shoreline and think, oh, you know what, let's just try and swim or paddle and just see what happens. I just knew that there was way more to this story, and it was very inspiring. And here we are kind of 8 years later, and I'm still researching and gathering information and listening to podcasts about the escape.
Well, that's cool. Well, we agree with you. Obviously, from what we learned about, we both knew about the escape. I lived in San Francisco for a period of time. Cindy went to college up there, and so it was always, and we've been on the tour and stuff like that, and it was always been a fascinating experience. So fascinating that Hollywood wanted to make an action movie centered around breaking into Alcatraz with The Rock with Sean Connery. So it's like this lore and this epic tale of this prison island. Going back to all the Al Capone was there and everything else, but yeah, we were really interested in it too. And then ironically, Ken and Mike reached out to us through another friend, and they were on another friend's podcast, Cheryl Mack McCullum. And, they were just kind of doing the tour to try to get on podcast to promote their book. And I'm like, and they sent me their book, an advanced copy, or actually literally on text. They sent me the manuscript, and I was reading it in bed, and we were reading it in bed, and I was reading it to her out loud. And I'm like, we can't just do one podcast on this. This is friggin' so deep. And these guys did such a amazing job excavating all this information. I'm like, this deserves a lot. This deserves time. And, and we thought maybe, we'll get like maybe 10 podcasts out of it. And then obviously a year later, this case is still going on. We're so knee deep into this that, we spent a lot of our own money and resources, sending people down there to try to find, evidence of them there, try to find them and evidence of there and their potential relatives. And we're continually still doing it. We're doing like, DNA stuff and because we're just so convinced and entrenched that obviously they did make it. We believe this.
But I think what you just said, Jamie, is interesting because they were so creative. The film with Clint Eastwood didn't really show who these guys were. And that was the thing for me. When I read the book, I was like, I had no idea how creative these guys were and how smart they were and how interesting they were as characters. And I think that creativity is what, like you just said, helped them escape. And no one's ever really honed in on that before this book. And I think that there's no way that they would have been the type of guys, in my opinion, to just not have a plan, just like, oh, we're just going to escape and that's it. We're going to swim. It just didn't add up with the way that Ken and Mike depicted them in that book. So for us, after reading that book, I was like, this is a whole new world of these characters that I didn't know anything about. And that depiction in that film with Clint Eastwood, as good as that movie was, did not depict them properly at all, in my opinion. I mean, I just think they just didn't have the information. They didn't do their research on these two guys. So I think that's interesting that you picked up on that their creativity really was one of the things that stuck out as something that would have led to them having a plan, making it out alive and going on, to Brazil or wherever. And
then to have the family background from a family member to kind of really describe like, who Clarence and John were, they basically groomed themselves for that moment ever since they were, young kids, just doing their thefts as an early age in and out of reform schools and juvenile institutions. And they were they were so entrenched and they groomed themselves for this iconic moment when they had to escape the most infamous prison of all time. It's just your word epic is truly the right word. And I think we're dealing with something like right now. I mean, prison escapes and jail escapes. There's one that just happened in Louisiana and New Orleans, which is like, not as intricate as the John and Clarence is, but they did have they're saying they did have help on the inside, and the 9 of them got out, and they got they've gotten 2 back, but anywhere where you have like an escape like that, it's like everybody's it's like it's such a tale that you think no one can escape prison or jail and stuff like that, but when it happens, you're like, wow. So that's what really kind of drew us to the story. And then when we started reading the book and we started understanding the characters behind them and what their personalities were like, the fact they came from a gigantic family and, that they were God-fearing and they were generally good people, but, they were just poor and they didn't want to be poor anymore. They weren't violent people. And so that it kind of really sets the backdrop of you're really wanting to root for them. If they made it this far, what makes you think that they didn't have a plan outside of that? And that's what these guys illustrated perfectly. Yeah, which is amazing. And the book is amazing. But okay, so 2017, we're in 2025. So for the past 8 years, this has been like what, a side hobby for you, investigating interest? Like, tell me a little bit about that. Like, what have you found that you thought was interesting about the case and what, your thoughts are?
Sure. So I think maybe I definitely know at the time, I'm not sure if this subconsciously played into it, but I was dating a politician that was from the US. I don't know if that connection to the US as well kind of led me down the rabbit hole with the escape, because every time I wasn't doing music or in the studio or playing a gig, I used to drive my ex-girlfriend crazy because I'd be in bed at like 1 a.m. in the morning, just looking through articles about Alcatraz and the escape and, she would say, oh, when are you going to put your phone down? You're going to go to bed. And I'm like, oh, I think I might be able to find out where they are in Brazil. I think I might be able to find out where the farm is. And she's like, you're crazy. But I think the researching the actual escape and the brothers and Frank Morris, it really did escalate for me, in all honesty, during the pandemic. When we were all thrown into lockdown and there wasn't a lot to do other than our daily walks and everything like that, I kind of set out a task almost to think, okay, I need to find out whereabouts in Brazil the brothers are and where the farm was. And I think that kind of leads me quite nicely to part of the reason I wanted to come onto the show, because I've noticed in the last couple of podcast episodes that you've dropped, you've been talking a lot about Michael Dykes' involvement and his place in all of this, which is quite interesting to me, because I think I very much share a lot of the same views as Ken and Mike and on this. And that is, I actually, because we had so much downtime in the pandemic and the lockdowns, I actually spent the time to reach out to as many people I knew involved in this case as I could. And I reached out to Michael Dyke on LinkedIn. And what I'm going to do, I haven't been able to do it right now, but I'm going to share the conversation thread that we had privately with you guys at some point at the end of the show, or through email or something. I'll send you the snapshots. But pretty much as Ken and stuff and Mike, you've laid out in previous episodes, I asked him very specifically what he thought about the Brazil photo. I said, look, this is very compelling, Mike. I hope you're well and your family is well in the lockdown and everything, and everybody's healthy. I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but I would like to ask you about the Brazil photo and what you think about the escape and anything that you found that could be interesting and useful. Because I said I was doing my own investigation on the case. And he just basically, I was quite surprised. He wrote back within a few days. And he said, yeah, thank you for reaching out, Jamie. I can tell you now that the two individuals in the photo is not the brothers. It's not the Anglin brothers. And basically, he just lays out this whole story and all this information about how, the reason he was able to determine that was because he took a ruler or some kind of measurement device. And he said, I measured the Brazil photo against some other snapshots that I had of the brothers. And I just made the measurements, and he said we used he said they used something else, but he said because he compared the photos, the arms and the fingers and the hands and how long they were, he said it couldn't have been the brothers. He said they're absolutely way off. And I just remember thinking, is this guy on drugs or something? There's absolutely no way that surely they don't use that in law enforcement, do they? That's
No.
Not surely.
No,
Not a ruler.
Not anything. We've worked on dozens of cases, and I've never ever heard this in my entire life.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Anyone who knows basic photography knows that.
Right. We're filmmakers. We know, like, the depth of perception and
depth of field.
depth of field. It's not.
You can't do a
Like,
measurement.
I can stand here. Or I
Yeah,
can
look
stand,
at. Yeah,
Look,
I mean,
look.
she's taller than me now.
Right.
Now
I'm taller than him.
That's the thing.
Like-
There's so many variables to that, that kind of approach to do it. I just thought, well, how do you know how close they are to the camera and compared to the other photos you have? And I've just never known that to be done before. I thought there's no way that can be a definitive, okay, yeah, that means it's not them, surely.
Yeah. No, we agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, we respect, Michael Dykes. I mean, he had an illustrious career with the U.S. Marshals, but we were a little. I mean, Ken tells this story all the time.
I'm a little
and
shocked
because
by it.
he's told him the same thing, and we were like,
and it's listen, we're not here to bash, Michael Dykes. He is a respected law enforcement person.
Of course, yeah.
But I do not understand this theory of his. Maybe he believes that, but I just have never seen anything like that in our experience working with law enforcement and experts in cases. Like, it's It doesn't make sense. Okay,
Yeah.
so he tells you this, and then
And then he did go on to share a little bit. He didn't go into too much detail about this, but he did say, "Oh, there is other information I have as well that is not in the public domain. That to me," he says, "it confirms that it's not the brothers in the Brazil photo." And he didn't share any more than that, but he did go on to say that he basically tried to completely discredit Fred Breezy.
Yeah.
And again, I'll show you the messages, the exact messages I have from him later in this podcast. But he said he just thought that he basically just said that Fred Breezy, it was a cash grab, and that he was just out for, there was a reward or something back in 1993 or something, and that he that's the only reason why Fred Breezy come forward, because he wanted to grab the money. And yeah, that was pretty much what he said about it. So he basically discredited Fred Breezy. He said he was just after the money.
Yeah.
And that he was, a compulsive liar and stuff like that. And I just thought, but surely if you look at all the circumstantial information there, and you see, Fred Breezy's connection to the brothers, and that they grew up together, and he's close with the family, clearly, with the Anglin family. And why would he lie to them about that? It seems to me that would be really cruel. And from what I've heard from everything about Fred Breezy through the book that Ken and Mike wrote, and all the information I've seen about Fred Breezy, it just doesn't really, there's no reason for him to lie about that, especially to the family.
Ken.
Yes.
Tell us what you think about what Jamie just said. Sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this about Fred Breezy. Okay. The family paid him not one dime. I mean, he didn't charge the family to come and talk to them and tell them, the story. There is no disputing that he went to Brazil. Okay. His wife verifies it. There is no disputing that those photos were taken in Brazil. Okay. So he was there. Even Marshall Dykes sat there and told me when I showed him those photos, oh yeah, this was taken in Brazil. This before he started, bashing the photos. We know the location that he went to. It should be a place that Americans at that time didn't really kind of go to. I mean, we're talking about a really small town. And then you start looking at the photos. Why would he take a photo of a house on the hill? What's the purpose of that? Why would he take a photo of two individuals and give it to my family? Why would he give them a photo of two individuals they didn't know? So
and why would he take a photo of himself with someone in Brazil, a woman?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And
there's no reason for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he knows. So he told things that John. Okay, so let's assume he was lying, that he didn't meet John, he didn't meet Clarence, and he's making the story up. Well, he tells things about the escape that was only in the FBI files, wasn't in any newspapers, wasn't in any other type source. The FBI files were not released until the mid-2000s. Rather. So he had no access to them to say, oh, I'm going to make up this story about them talking about using the prison boat to come across. That's only in the FBI files. So how did he know this?
Yep.
I mean, it just seems like maybe with Ken, what year did he meet with the family?
1992, right?
Well, that's when
that's the second one, right? He met before that too.
Well, in 1992, he met with the family twice. He came and met with them in October, and then the one that we have recorded and the photo of, that was in, I believe it was like December of 1992. But now he was already in contact with Uncle Man in 1986, right after he got out of prison. We have documents where he was in Yellowstone National Park at the exact same time that my Uncle Man was there. I mean, we have photos of both of them, not together, but at the same location, at the same time frame in September of 1986. So this is right before my grandfather dies. So, he was in contact with them even before that. Well, I say Uncle Man. Uncle Man is the one who originally brings him to the family. He didn't come to the family and say, hey, I want to tell you the story. Uncle Man went and got Steve, you remember when he was on, talked about Uncle Man had him, his dad had him drive him over to Breezy's house, would not allow him to come in, went out, met with him, came back, and then that's when he started bringing him to the England family to meet with them. So it was Uncle Man who initiated this, not Breezy.
Yeah. I think like when America's Most Wanted happened, that was what, 1993?
Well, so it had to be in 92 because Fred Breezy talks about it in the meeting with the England family in December of 92.
So when he called,
it had already occurred.
It happened, yeah. So he might have called America's Most Wanted because he knew where they were, and maybe he did want the money.
No, I don't think so. I think based upon what you told me is that he just thought they were caught already.
He thought they were already caught. Okay.
Yeah, so America's Most Wanted never paid him anything. Where he got $1,000 was from Inside Edition. They offered him. This was after the meeting with the England family. Inside Edition offered him to pay him $1,000 if he would do an interview. He agreed, and even in the meeting in 92, he states this to the family. He said, I wasn't going to do it. I wrote or I sent a message down to the brothers to ask them, were they okay with it? And they responded, as long as it doesn't come back on us, we don't care. So clearly he asked, could he do it? And they said, okay. And he did it. He really did. He got paid $1,000 by Inside Edition. But America's Most Wanted did not.
He never got anything. So what is Michael Dykes talking about? It's a money grab then. What is he saying? And that's the thing that I don't understand. Like people say these things, but they don't have anything to back it up. So it's like, okay, well, it was a money grab for him, but if it was $1,000, it's not a money grab.
No.
So it's like if he really wanted to make, money on this, then he would have lied more or lied in general and just made up a whole fabricated story. It just doesn't make sense.
For sure, yeah. I think I'm just looking at this now. That the exact words he used was habitual liar.
Oh.
You mean kind of like the FBI sometimes,
right?
and the U.S. Marshals.
I think the other component is as well, going back to the credibility of Fred Breezy, which occurred to me, was that at that point when he did go to the U.S. Marshals to discuss this, at that point he probably would have known, okay, the Anglin brothers, they probably had new IDs at that point. They couldn't have been extradited anyway for any kind of trial. So he knew they were going to be pretty safe. And that's probably another reason why he wasn't worried about talking about it.
Well, I do know in that tape recording, he does warn the family several times about, not revealing anything about the brothers. He even says one time, they were in the process at that time of writing a book with Don DeNeve. Actually, the book had already been written. Don DeNeve was talking to them about writing a second book. And he tells them, he says, listen, do not share this with Don DeNeve. No, Don, he calls him Don. Don't share this with Don. Little did we know until years later that Don DeNeve was working with U.S. Marshal Art Roderick. He was going back after meeting with the family and giving information to Art. But so, it wasn't like, this was not like some person. I have yet to find anything that Fred Breezy said. Like if we had gone, when we went to Brazil with Josh Gates, if we were not able to find the town, nor the farm, nor in some of these other locations, if we got there and no one remembered anyone being there, but we find the house that he took the photo of, we find the farm area where that famous photo was taken at, very close to it. So everything that Fred said kind of started matching up, even to the point when we start learning that Mickey Cohen is the one who helped them, financed it. The fact that Fred said when they got to shore, they left their clothes on the bank. They had new clothes. They had a new ID. They had passports, and they had money in their pocket. Okay. Well, the England family could not have supplied that. They were too poor. Frank Morris had no family, so he had no means to support something like that. And it backs up something that Mickey Cohen did for his girlfriend, Candy Barr. He did the exact same thing. He gave her new clothes, he gave her an ID, and he gave her money when he took her out of the country.
Yep.
Same MO.
Mike, what do you think? What are you saying here, Jamie?
Well, it's easy to just sort of have, broad stroke, oh, he's a liar, he's a criminal. Yeah, he's a criminal, and yeah, he's a liar. We're all liars. We're not habitual liars, hopefully, but we have our moments. But just to say, well, because of that, he's disreputable. You can't believe a word he says, and you can dismiss everything about his quote unquote testimony, with the family about what happened. But then when you start looking at it point by point and scrutinizing the details, that's where those accusations start to fall apart. Because he goes to the family, he doesn't say anything. Well, I'll tell you this information for $1,000. He doesn't do that. He doesn't extort them. It's his uncle is the one that initiates this. It's not Fred Breezy. Fred Breezy doesn't try to use this information and to sell a book or, to get interviews for money. He doesn't do those things, except that one time with Inside Edition. But they reached out to him. He didn't reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
So again, people are initiating in his direction, not the other way around. Or, like Jamie said, why would he lie to the family about this? What would be the purpose of doing that when it served no purpose other than, like Jamie said, just to be cruel? That it just doesn't pass the smell test.
No, and I think he's not a stranger to the family.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Like,
and
he's known them.
And on top of that, law enforcement, if they have information that is going to get them a conviction, if it's coming from a habitual liar like a criminal, they'll use that person in court's testimony. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's all relative to them. He's a liar if it doesn't work, if it works against him. But if he's a liar, but if it works for that person to close a case, they'll use that person. And also on the flip side of it, law enforcement's allowed to lie to you legally in the United States, at least. They're allowed, when they interrogate you, they can sit there and they go, we have someone we just talked to said you killed this person. Cindy has a friend who spent 18 years of his life in prison, and he was
from high school, where they lied to him and said his father told him that he killed his mother. He was 17 years old, and he was kept in there for hours and hours with no food, no water, nothing. He didn't know if he didn't know if his father was alive or dead. His mother they were found brutally attacked. And he kept him in there the police kept him in there for hours and hours interrogating him, and said, your father just called and said you did this. And he goes, my father said I did this? Did I do this? How did I do this? I was asleep.
Exactly.
And they arrested him, and they kept him in prison for 18 years. And we found out later that the cops were in cahoots with the business partner and the killer of his dad's business.
So it's like, not saying that Marshall Dykes or Art Roderick are those people.
No.
I'm just saying in general, it's relative to what they actually need information for. If it works for them, they'll accept a habitual liar. If it works against them, they're going to say he's a habitual liar. Like Art's declaration goes, he's a criminal, he's a liar. They're all liars.
But Art is very entertaining.
Yes.
I know you're listening, Art.
and two, the law enforcement, U.S. Marshals, FBI, and I don't want to disparage the FBI people. Most of the FBI special agents in the field people, they're good people. They
absolutely.
We know a lot of them, and they are
really
good people
at the top. But most of them will say Art does it. Michael Dykes will do it. Anytime you corner them into, show, you challenge their evidence, they always come back with, well, I've got information that I can't tell you about, or I've got something that no one has ever seen. And so it's a way for them to come back and say, I know more than you, and because I know more than you and I have access to these documents that you don't know what you're talking about.
To me, the only information that would work for us that would prove is if they had information, photographs, and DNA proof that they're dead.
Yeah.
That they died, and like shortly after the escape.
I think that's the one thing that probably frustrates me the most when I've listened to Art Roderick or Michael Dykes talk about this. It's because you can just tell it's a shame in some ways, because I'm sure there's no doubt that they're really good people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's no doubt about
Absolutely.
that. But when I've heard them talk about the case, it seems to me that there's a lot of egos involved. Mm-hmm. And I remember Art saying in the last episode, he was saying to you guys, just remember, if you come into this case, make sure to leave your conspiracy theories at the door. But then I remember thinking, but Art, at the same time, you've got to remember to leave your ego at the door as well. Just because they haven't solved the case, it doesn't mean that they didn't escape and that the information that you've presented is not accurate. Just because they haven't managed to catch them or be able to crack the case, it doesn't mean that all the other information is just out the window.
Yeah, I mean, the pause that I see in Art when we start talking about the Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren bonding out Mickey Cohen, for like 4 to 5 months, and then he comes back a month before the escape, and I ask him, I look him straight in the eye, and the look on his he actually pauses before every time I ask him that, I can read his face saying, yeah, that's never been done before. So that's highly unusual, and it hasn't been done since. Mm-hmm. So it's like that's where I'm like, to me that's like the chink in his armor for his argument.
There's
we can build around that, then we after that. But and like I said, he may well have. We obviously has information that we don't have. But like I said, what that is, the only thing I can think of is that they never found them, so they don't exist.
But and it's kind of like even today with Art and Dykes, they're just like what was going on right after the escape. Why some of these FBI agents, and I say the agents, the upper level people, just dismissed so much evidence that was there in front of them early on into the case. No, that didn't happen. You didn't see a boat, Cliff Fish didn't find the raft, just dismiss all that stuff. And then you get, years and years and years later, we're giving, evidence, me and Mike, through the family, the photos, and they still dismiss it. It's like nothing has ever changed. For some reason, they do not want to follow leads.
Dear old work platform, it's not you, it's us. Actually, it is you. Endless onboarding? Constant IT bottlenecks? We've had enough. We need a platform that just gets us. And to be honest, we've met someone new. They're called Monday.com, and it was love at first onboarding. Their beautiful dashboards, their customizable workflows got us floating on a digital cloud 9. So no hard feelings, but we're moving on. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
In this case,
I think it's ego. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's either ego or there's something else surrounding that escape that they don't want people to know.
That's true too. I mean, it could be connected to something else that is not public or they don't want anyone to know about. I mean,
and then putting on my conspiracy hat for just 1 second, we talked about this. We talked about the farm in Mexico, that candy bar saw Lee Harvey Oswald. That candy bar was also connected to Jack Ruby. I mean, there's a whole other thing here that you can kind of really spiral out of control. But who knows? I mean, as we know, as we're finding out every day with all these things that people say are conspiracies, even stuff that's happening today that, that's happened in the last, 4 to 8 years about everything, whether it's COVID, whether it's the elections or anything, everything, things that people suspect that happened, we're finding out actually did happen, and that we were gaslit to think that It didn't happen.
Mhm.
And so, and it's like, I'm not making this up. It's all coming out. And even on both sides of the spectrum and the media spectrum, they're all talking about it. And they say, oh yeah, we missed it. We did this and like that. So there is a level of controlled information that happens even today in this information explosion that we have, that people have access to 24/7. Back then, they didn't. They could control information really tight. And they, and then they couldn't, it was basically the newspapers and television. That's it. And they, and it was like 3 networks, lots of newspapers, but pretty much the same people owned all the newspapers. So there was, they really had a stranglehold on the information that was being decimated to the public. So, and as they do today to a certain extent, but now with all this independent journalism, I mean, we're always considered the conspiracy theorists, when we're actually leaning on work that you guys have done for years, where you have the receipts. So it's not like you guys are making these claims. Every claim you make, you back it up with a receipt. It's not like, you're not saying this happened like that. Oh, this happened, and here's the document to prove it. Or this happened, here's the photograph that describes it. And this happened, Fred Beasley did grow up with them. We have, the family inside. So it's like, it's not like you're making this up and pulling this out of thin air. So I think that, it's easy for people in the government can say that didn't happen. That, we know more than you. We have the files that says X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, after 60 plus years, what are you hiding? Exactly. Okay, I mean, stuff that happened 4 years ago is coming out. It's like there's nothing really to hide anymore. There's no stakes. There's no end game. The only end game is like, hey, listen, let's just kind of communally just agree that this happened, and these guys found out the information, and they found proof. I mean, there's no skin off your back for acknowledging that they made it and they lived out their lives, and they're not alive now. We're pretty certain that they're not alive now. Okay, I mean, there's only one person alive in that lineage, and that's your mom. I mean, and so there's nothing at stake here, and that's why it baffles me that when Art is just like very, he says he's still very much involved in the U.S. Marshals, and he says that it's going to come out. It's going to come out. I go, well, what are you waiting for at this point?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what are we waiting for?
Are you waiting? Is this going to be inscribed on people's tombstones? I really knew what happened. I have, it's like.
Can you just imagine today, though, with the escape that just recently occurred, 10 individuals, Yeah. Can you imagine that if an off-duty police officer had been standing out, across the street, and he witnessed a car out, just waiting out there, and then speed off, and then him contacting the FBI the next morning going, hey, I think that car might have been involved in the escape. They would be all over it. They'd be like, oh, yeah, this is a great lead, But when Officer Chechi does this, they try to make him out to be a liar.
Yeah.
And you're like going, this guy is giving you credible information. This is the very next morning. You have enough time that the boat's probably not moved anywhere, wherever it went to. They didn't even take the time to go look for the boat.
Well, that's not until he did the interview with the Oakland Tribune a week later.
Exactly.
Then he grudgingly started looking around the bay for the boat. So he had, like you were saying, Rob, about, the FBI was the primary source of information. They were semi-burying the information. They were not acting on it. This is actionable intelligence. I get it. Yeah. And when Chechi realizes what they're doing, that they're going to bury this thing, he goes to an outside source, and it forces the FBI to act. And that's what happens. Now, of course, they don't find the boat, but he had to go elsewhere to get them to do something.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he get in trouble from the San Francisco Police Department for doing that?
I don't think he got it. No, he didn't get in trouble, but he did get harassed by his coworkers because
I knew he got some blowback.
Knowledge, and he mentioned one time he opened his locker and they used to put pictures of boats in there with sayings like, "Is this the boat that you saw?" So everybody was kind of making fun of it.
Got it.
But what's amazing is if he had not gone to the newspaper, nobody would have known this story. It would not be out there today. It's not in the FBI files anywhere. It would have been buried forever, and no one would have ever known about that photo.
Yeah, his name isn't even in the report at all.
No.
But Art acknowledges it.
Yeah. Well, Art says a lot of things.
No, but he acknowledges it. He acknowledges that his story,
Yeah.
so that, so it's like it's two sides of the story.
All right. So, Jamie, that's interesting that you reached out to Michael Dykes. I like that.
Anything else?
I like when you take initiative like that when you're interested in it. So what happened after that?
That was kind of the end of the conversation with Michael Dyke. However, around that time during the pandemic, I was actually really excited to talk to all of you about this today, because I don't know if Rob and Cindy, I know obviously Ken was featured on this, and Mike, you said that you had seen the Mission Declassified documentary episode with Christoph Putzel. I watched that over the pandemic, and to me, for a while, I was almost convinced that the location that he found in Tabate is a possible location for where the Anglin brothers would have set up camp, because I rewatched that the other day, and if you look at the location that Christoph Putzel found, and it discusses how it was the farm of the Americans, and even people in the community and the people that spoke on that particular documentary episode, they all talk about how it's almost unheard of that you would have found two Americans living in that part of Brazil in that time period back in the 70s. It's almost unheard of, to the point that they were actually called the farm of the the farm of the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And I rewatched that the other day because I wanted to ask you, Ken, about this, because I know in a previous podcast episode you've said that you thought the background in the Brazil photo of the Anglin brothers, for a while you thought it was a river, and then you did say recently, you and Mike had changed your mind, and that actually you can confirm that it was actually a road that's in the background.
Yeah, when we were in Brazil with Josh Gates, he was looking at that photo, and so was a guide that we had. His name was Caio. He was from Brazil, and he told us. I never really kind of thought about it, because for the longest time I thought it was a river, because it looked like a bank on the other side of what would have been the water.
It's hard to tell.
He told me that there was a major highway. We actually drove on it to get to that area from where we were at. But it's a major kind of highway that stretches from Rio to São Paulo. And he said that was the road that was being constructed, and that he was pretty sure that they were standing on their part of their farm, which if this is the location of the farm, which we believe it is, comes right up next to that road. So it is very possible that was the road that we were looking at. Now, when Christoph went, I wasn't sure. I was very intrigued that he found a place called the Farm of the Americans, and people remember Americans being there. I didn't think it was legit at first, because I was still thinking that was a river, But now I would definitely, when we go back down there, I would not dismiss it altogether, because it was very close to this farm. It wasn't where we thought it was, but I would definitely be open to investigating it more.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, I reached out to Ken. I said, because at this time, Ken hadn't even told me yet about Monteiro Lobato. He told me a lot of things about Brazil, but he was still holding back specific information. That came later for me. And I said, so Ken, did he find them? Is he looking in the right location? He says, well, he got it close, but it's not the exact location. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. But and as I've thought about it since then, it would make sense to me that, John and Clarence and Frank Morris were very careful people, obviously. One of the things that Whitey Bulger said before the escape, and he talked about it after the escape, was you have to cut off all ties with the family. You got to lay low. You got to start a new life independent of the life you led before. And so one of the things, as wanted fugitives, it would make sense to me that they would not stay around in any one place for too long, because the longer you're there, the more likely you're to be identified. And the Alcatraz case, obviously it did die down after the escape, but it never went away. There was always, in the FBI report over a period of years, the FBI keeps going back to Brazil to look for them. We have the records of them searching and not finding them, because they would get a tip, they would get a sighting, and they would go send an agent to check it out. So it would make sense that they would be there at different places at different times. So it is possible Montero Lobato was one place and Tabate was another place that they were there for a time, and then they moved on to somewhere else. So that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And let's just be clear. I mean, we've been working with law enforcement for years on a bunch of different cases, and cold cases, active cases, and even on active cases, even if it's current and it's going, them working on it means for some of these things, these investigations, they're waiting for tips. So they're like maybe going through old tips and information like that, but they're waiting for actionable tips. So it's not like how we've been doing the investigation, how you guys have done it was like when you were writing the book, like you were actively looking at all this stuff over and over and analyzing it and looking at and piecing together these puzzles. They're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're just, it's in a file. And if they get a tip, they pull it out and they start comparing it with other information like that. It's not their primary focus day to day. It's this for us for the past year, and for you guys Ken, it's been like almost like, over a decade now.
Yes.
And, for Mike, it's been short, since you guys have been writing the book. So it's like, you got like at least 5-6 years in.
Yep.
So, this has been like your daily quest. This has been your daily thing where you do. Obviously you're living your lives otherwise, but as far as information and investigating, and now with this podcast, like I tell everybody, I go, we talk probably at least 3 or 4 times a week via text about information on this, in addition to the podcast. And so it's like, and that's been for, the entire year. Yeah. 52 weeks, so it's like, I don't think Art right now is investigating this. He may have some additional information, but it's in a file somewhere. We have, I don't know how many, we have the files, and we have the talking about them actually going down there, and when they said they didn't go down there. So it's like, why did you say you didn't go down there when there's a file that literally said you went down there? And it's like, and they says, Art was telling us, he goes, well, we have them on Interpol, if their prints show up, if they do anything wrong, we have them on a red notice. I'm not a mastermind or a career criminal, but you can alter your fingerprints, you can get rid of your fingerprints. And so it's like, and they would have to be caught for something, number one. And number two, they're obviously they had aliases when they were kids.
Right.
You don't think they're going to have, they learned how to do that at a very young, you don't think they're not going to have aliases and paperwork that kind of really hide their identities, and them being down there so long, and they were successful farmers. All it does is, that country's built on bribes. You can get the federal documentation, IDs very easily if you bribe the right person. So it's not like, and you can do that here in the US. So, and something like Brazil, which is kind of most of these countries that you can bribe an official very easily.
And back during that time frame, those little small towns in Brazil, they didn't have law. There was no law enforcement. And so, even if they did something that was illegal, and, who's going to catch them? That was one of the reasons why a lot of people went to Brazil, was because there was no law. The only law was in these major cities. And we know they were not in the major cities.
Well, and Fred Breezy talks about that in the tape, or the recording, that where they were staying, it was very rural, and outside the cities, it was kind of the Wild West kind of flavor of, you just set up a town, you just sort of ran the town as you saw it, and you took care of matters, yourself, and you didn't rely on outside authorities to do that. And the person that met John, Clarence, and Frank in the early 70s, he was the kind of the sheriff that the town sort of collectively hired to be the law for them. He wasn't a lawman, but they said, you'll be our protector. And he was, and he investigated, make sure these guys weren't trouble. And, they paid him to give supplies for several months until they left. So, and Fred Breezy corroborates that. He talks about how the town was very rural and there was no real authority there.
Yeah. And like, we've been doing a lot of small town murder investigations in these small towns and all over the country. But in those small towns, it's their own little feudal system. It's like you think that bribery and scandal, they cover stuff up all the time, because everybody is like, it's the good old boy network and everybody's related to the DA and the sheriff and the sheriff. In this one case, we got a corrupt sheriff that was in there for 16 years who could barely write. He had he was illiterate. And he spent in command there for 16 years and was able to run an illegal drug ring through his son, through his house for that long, using his patrol car to transport drugs. And everyone kind of turned a blind eye. So it's like, if it can happen here, you don't think in a rural town and agricultural town and outside of, Sao Paulo, up in the jungle, people don't want to deal with that stuff. They'll turn a blind eye for some money. And if you're not bothering them and they're giving you money, they're not going to do anything.
And they'll just mind their own business.
They'll mind their own business. So they couldn't have went to the more perfect place to hide out.
I'm curious, Jamie, you talked about, the guy who did the documentary. Did you get in contact with him about what he found, what he saw, any communication with him?
Yes, it was one of the first things I did once I watched the documentary, is I tried to find his details. And I will say on the subject of Christoph Putzel's documentary is that when you see him go there and he talks to the people that now occupy the farm, and they start talking to him and they say, yeah, back in the 70s, there was these two individuals called the Farm of the Americans that lived here and they ran a farm. When you see Christoph Putzel walk up into the fields and into the farm, and you see all of those anthills, and then you see the road in the background, and then you see him actually put the photo up against the road. He puts the Brazil photo up against the background and the skyline and the vegetation. It all just aligns and it all matches up. And I just thought, wow. What if that actually was one of the locations that they ended up at? And I did reach out to him and I had a brief exchange with Christoph and he wrote back and I said, are you able to talk a little bit about the documentary that you shot? And he said, yeah. He said, there's no doubt in my mind after the research and the investigation that we conducted that not only did they survive the escape and make it to Brazil, but he just had a feeling in his gut, he said, that when he went to that location and then he put the photo up against the backdrop of the road and all of the kind of vegetation behind it there at the farm, he said there's no doubt that he was walking on the very land that the Anglin brothers did back in the 70s. He was pretty sure that he had found one of the locations. Just like Ken and Mike, when they're walking around there.
I'm still friends with him, and I talked to him probably a few months ago, and I might have to ask him to see if he'd be interested in coming on, sharing.
Yeah, sure. We should have him on.
Definitely, you should have him on. That would be really exciting, and I can't remember what I was going to say. Sorry.
That's okay.
No, I was very impressed with the show. I liked his show very much, and I really, now looking back, I would say it's probably a very good place to go look and do some more research in.
Well, I'm curious because I did see the documentary a few years ago, but I don't remember how he got tipped off to that's the location. How did he find it to begin with?
If I remember right, I think even Art. Now, when the Fred Breezy information first kind of came out, I was still looking with Google Maps, trying to figure out where it was located at, even with the information that that Fred had given. Well, the U.S. Marshals had it in text form at that time, and he had already figured out that it was in that Tibet area.
Tabate.
Yeah,
Tabate.
yeah. Because I was like, well, how did you know that? And he was like, well, we have access to be able to get to some stuff. And so they were already looking in that area. And that might have been how Christoph got kind of tipped off to a location. I think he also had some sources down there, and someone told him about this farm of Americans. I think it's called the Farm of Americans or something like that. And so he decided to go check it out. And I will say it's very close to where I had originally thought or originally found out. And so I didn't discredit it in any way. I just thought that photo was a river, and it turned out to be a road.
It's hard. I must admit, it's hard when you look at the photo really to determine exactly if it is a river or a road. It could be either one.
Right.
Well, when we were down there, and obviously we're talking a lot about the photo because we're trying to find a location that would match it as closely as possible. And of course, Ken was saying that's a river. And I said, I don't know. I don't think that's a river. Because to me, the water was too blue. And the water down there is not blue; it's brown.
It's brown.
And I said, I don't think it's a river. I think it's something else. And so we had a little debate about it until we got the information about the road being built at the time, and then sort of Ken kind of begrudgingly moved into the road camp.
Lots to talk about. It's great. Jim, do you have anything else you want to share with us?
It was just those two things mainly.
Great information.
Thank you. Yeah. So both of those exchanges with both Michael Dyke and Christoph Putzel, that happened over the pandemic. And I haven't spoke to either of them since, but I just found the information very interesting, especially the Christoph Putzel stuff. And I've wanted to speak to you, Ken and Mike, about this for a while to see what you thought, because as you say, Mike, it does seem very, very likely and plausible that because of how careful they were and because they had escaped and everything like that, and they were trying to be very much under the radar, that they would have moved to a few different locations. And I guess the only thing I'd like to say, just from listening to the show, is where are you guys at? If you can share anything, where are you at with this connection where you think John might have lived? And you said you found the house and everything in a gated community. Has there been any developments with that?
I'll let Ken answer that.
When the second photograph was originally sent, I could, again, just like I kind of say in the first photo, I wanted it to be him. I wanted it to be them, but as a relative, I know I've got to be objective, and I really needed someone else, a scientific type, to look at it. And Michael Street looked at the second photo. He found even more, markers of it being John than even the first photo. So that really then was like, okay, you're sparking my interest now. And now that I've been in contact a lot with the individual who sent it, and they're trying to get more photos, and they're sharing things that kind of make sense, kind of doesn't, but we do know where the house, he, told us where the address of the house is. It is in a gated community. We do know that the individual is dead. We have their death certificate. And so we're really hoping that when we go down, the house has not been lived in since this individual and his wife passed away.
9 years, 10 years.
Yeah. So we're really hoping that we can go into the house, get access to it, because one, I would be a relative. And if we can get into this house, there's going to be hopefully other photos. There's going to be DNA, fingerprints. So this will really be good since no one's disturbed that house since they passed away.
Yeah, that's been the most exciting information we've gotten recently, and the fact that it's not like it's coming from thin air. It's coming from boots on the ground. It's coming from someone who doesn't speak English, so it's like they're the fact that they've lived there, they actually had interaction with this person, so it's not like, here, I found this photo, I don't know who this is, kind of looks like him. He goes, no, I knew this person. Actually he said he worked with him, correct, Ken?
Yeah.
So it's and he gives character description saying that, he didn't really talk about his past. He didn't he was very, he kind of describes what John's personality's like, the same way that Whitey Bulger described him, as very being to himself and very, to not giving up any information, all that kind. So the data points link up. It's just whether or not, I wish we could go to tomorrow. I mean, it's like, I literally wish we can blink and be there tomorrow, because it's, like I said, it could be a treasure trove. It could be the smoking gun, or it could be someone who's just a doppelganger, who just look like him. But he did share another photo with us, which is more kind of like a full frame 3/4 shot from like the waist up of him standing in front of the house, and he's wearing a baseball hat. And it's still, even from that angle, it's remarkable, the likeness.
It actually looks a lot like Uncle Man, because he's an older gentleman, much heavier than he is in the other photo we have. And I thought, wow, he resembles Uncle Man very strongly, which would make sense, being brothers. They would look like each other.
Yeah.
I'll also say this, that Rob and Cindy are currently pursuing opportunities for us to go down there. We're sort of waiting on some things to happen that are hopefully very close. It's been a long wait for certain things to transpire. We can't go into details, of course, but as soon as we get this information and we get the thumbs up, then the chances of us going down there relatively soon is about 100%.
Yep.
So we're just waiting on a few things to line up. That should be very, very soon.
Yep.
Yeah. And that'll be the first thing we do.
Yeah.
Yes. Secure that location.
Yeah. But anyway, Jamie, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Your interest and your own investigation.
It's great. We love it.
We love the fact that, unfortunately, it was one of the good things that came out of COVID for you, that you got to dive deep into this. We appreciate you coming on and sharing. And obviously, if you find anything else in your endeavors and while you're poking around, don't hesitate to contact us. This is an open investigation, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Well, as Art says, stand by.
Stand by.
Stand by.
Something's coming.
Something's coming. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show today. It's been very exciting. It's been very, very fun to do this, and I look forward to hearing more about what happens down in Brazil with this gated community and everything else. And good luck with the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
All
Jamie.
Right. Hold on.
Stuck in a job you hate? Wish you could break into tech, but don't know where to start? CBT Nuggets makes IT training simple, affordable, and dare we say, fun. With short, engaging videos and hands-on virtual labs, you can build real-world skills right from your browser. No expensive hardware, no confusing software. Just practical training that gets you job ready. Learn at your own pace, on your own schedule, from anywhere. Start your 7-day free trial at cbtnuggets.com. Because a better career is just a few clicks away.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, is telling everyone, let's face it in therapy. By talking or texting with a supportive, licensed therapist at Talkspace, you can face whatever is holding you back, whether it's mental health symptoms, relationship drama, past trauma, bad habits, or another challenge that you need support to work through. It's easy to sign up. Just go to Talkspace.com and you'll be paired with a provider, typically within 48 hours. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule. Plus, Talkspace is in-network with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. Make your mental health a priority and start today. If you're not covered by insurance, get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com and enter promo code SPACE80. That's SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com and enter promo code SPACE80.